Okay, this is the video for the review for test 1. Okay, factor by grouping. We need to group these, just like that. You can tell I had to erase because I messed up on the first video. Alright, so I'm going to factor out a v squared. I am left with 4v minus 5. Over here, you're going to factor out what they both have in common. And they both have a 7 in common, so it's going to factor out a 7. And you're left with 4v minus 5. Now, pull out what both of these, this is one term here, this is the other. They both have a 4v in common, 4v minus 5 in common. And the other set of parentheses is going to be what you have on the outside, which is v squared plus 7. The only thing you need to make sure of, will this factor further? It won't. So we're done. Because you always got to double check to make sure you can't factor further. Right here, again, I'm going to group these first two. I'm going to group the second two. I am going to pull out a 3x squared because that's what they both have in common, the first grouping. When I do that, I'm left with 4x plus 1. Don't forget, when you take 3x squared and divide it by 3x squared, you get 1. Over here, because this term, your first term's negative, we are going to factor out a negative. And then when you look at 4x and 1, you may not think they have anything in common, but everything has a 1 in common. So when I do that, I end up with 4x plus 1. Notice these both match. You're going to factor that out and get 4x plus 1. And that means you are left with 3x squared minus 1. And again, you just look to see if you can't factor any further. And that does not factor any further, so we're done. Okay. When it just says factor, the only rules to this really is make sure you factor completely, whether it says factor or whether it says factor completely. That's a really bad F. Anyway, so I don't know if I can get it any better, but oh well. Right here, I don't care how you factor. You can use AC method, you can use box method, you can use trial and error. I do trial and error. The way that I do it is I say to myself, the only way to get 3z is 3z and 1z. And the only way to get 8, I can a positive 8. Their signs are going to be the same because this one's negative. They're both going to be negative. So it's rather negative 1 and negative 8. Or it's going to be negative 2 and negative 3. Okay, so when you do that, when you have your two sets of parentheses, you're just going to try something. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, erase something and try it again. 3z I'm going to put here and z here because the first terms come from this. Otherwise, I won't be there. 3z times z gives us 3z squared when you're using FOIL. Okay. Now, I don't care what you try, but sometimes this one's going to work, sometimes this one's going to work. You just got to try it. I'm just going to put minus 2 and minus 3. When I do that, okay, that's not going to work because I'm going to try again. Oh, wait, what am I doing? I'm having trouble this morning. This would have been a 4. 2 times 4 gives us the 8, not 2 times negative 3. That's why it's not working. Okay, so I just put these in here. Now, if I use FOIL, this of course gives me 3z squared. This gives me negative 12 plus a negative 2 does not give me 10. That does not work. And it has nothing to do with the sign. It has to do with where I place this. So I'm just going to change and put the 4 here and put the 2 here. And it may or may not work. If it doesn't, we got to try something else. Okay, then we would try the 1 and the 8. So we get 3z squared This gives me negative 6z. This gives me a positive 4z. That gives me the negative 10z. And then negative 4 times negative 2 gives me 8. Okay, so it would help if I knew my multiplication tables to begin with instead of saying 2 times 3. Okay, the other way, that's how I do it. AC method. You can do AC method or the box method. They're kind of similar. I did not teach the box method in class. But AC method, if you can't do this, I would suggest always doing box method. So AC, you take your A, which is 3, multiply it times your C, okay, and you get 24. I want to know what multiplies, well, both of these are started the same way. Multiply or factors, okay, of 24 that add to give us this middle term of negative 10. Okay, so if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know those factors, okay, we know it's going to have to be the same sign. I'm looking for my calculator. Well, I taught it in class, okay. You will go y equals, then you're going to times your A times your C. You can, on this particular problem, you can say 3 times 8, or you can just put in 24. Then you're going to put divided by. Then you're going to put your X, which the button on your calculator looks like this. Okay. And then to see all the factors of 24, you're going to hit your second button. And then you're going to hit your trace button. Trace can be found by hitting graph. When you hit your second, it changes your graph to the table. And then you scroll up or down and you add the things that will give you the negative 10. Okay, seeing I don't have my calculator handy, I would start negative 1 and negative 24. This is just to show you. Okay, I won't do this after this. That gives us negative 25, so that's not it. Negative 2 and negative 12, but that gives me negative 14. Negative 3 and negative 8, that gives me negative 11. And then negative 4 and negative 6 gives us that negative 10. So these are the two that I'm going to use in both of these methods, okay? Here's what you do. On both of them, let me draw my box, okay? You rewrite, I'm going to rewrite this over here, the first term. On both of them. This goes here, and you rewrite the last term. What you're doing is you're taking this out, and you're going to replace it with your negative 4z and your negative 6z. And then you rewrite the 8. Okay, so you just bring the first and the last term down. Well, if you're going to do the box method, it's the same thing. You do 3z squared, and you put your last term in the last box. Okay, first term goes in the first box, 8 goes in your last term, your constant goes in the last box. Now, if you're going to do, and then for these two boxes, it doesn't matter which one you put. You can put negative 4 or negative 6z, and or negative 4 or negative 6z here. It doesn't matter where they go. Okay, so those two days so far are the same. The only difference is here you're going to use by grouping. You're not going to do that over here because this one's worked a little different. So let me do the grouping. I'm going to group this like this. I'm going to factor out a z. That means I'm left with a 3z minus 4. Here I'm going to factor out a negative, because this is negative, 2. And I'm left with 3z minus 4. And so it factors as 3z minus 4 and z minus 2. Now, over here, if you're going to do it this way, what we're going to do is we're going to go column by column, row by row, okay? Or row by row and then column by column. Okay, so I'm going to look at that row. They both have a z in common. So I just place that out to the side. This row, because this first term is negative, you're going to factor out what they both have in common. Because first terms are always negative, you factor out a negative. They both have a 2 in common. This one here is z minus 2. Now you do columns. Right here, they both have a 3z in common. And right here, your first term is negative, so you factor out a negative, and they both have a 4 in common. That is your second term, your second factor. You will notice it's the exact same answers, all three of them. Doesn't matter which order. Okay, so right here, you can factor it any way you want to. Again, I am going to factor it by trial and error first. All of them will factor. If you're having to solve, that's different, but we're wanting you to factor the directions say factor, so it's going to factor. Okay, so the first term comes from here. So it's rather 9y and y, or it's 3y and 3y. I'm always going to try the middle terms, what I call the ones that are close together, just like I tried these up here. So I'm going to do 3y and 3y. Now, because this is negative, one has to be negative, one has to be positive. I am just going to put it in anywhere. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Now, for 7, it's just 1 and 7. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to plug in one place. I'm going to plug in 7 another place. Let's put the 7 here and the 1 here, because I know it's going to be wrong. This is 9y squared. When I'm doing FOIL. Negative, when I do the outsides, it gives me negative 3y. When I do the insides, multiply those, I get a positive 21y. Well, that gives me a positive 18, not a negative 18. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave on anything. This one wouldn't matter, but on most it would. I am going to leave the numbers and I'm going to change my signs. Seeing my signs are the only thing that is wrong. I'm going to make this a plus and I'm going to make this a minus. Now, positive 3y, negative 21y, that gives me a negative 18y. Okay, for the other two, let's see if I can fit all this in. Okay, for both of them, you're going to do AC. So you're going to say 9 times 7. 9 times negative 7. Okay, that gives us negative 63. What multiplies to give you negative 63 adds to give us our middle term, which is negative 18. Okay. Sign has to be different. Okay, to give us 63, you have 1 and 63, and you have 3 and 21. 3 times negative 21 gives us negative 18. Now again, if you couldn't do that, I don't have my calculator handy. You go through these steps. You say y equals, press that button, and you can type it in like this, or you can type it in like this, either way. Divided by x. Then hit second graph, and it gives you all the factors of negative 63. You just got to figure out which ones add up to give us negative 18. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite my first one. If I'm doing the box method, the first term goes here, It's a bad box. It's kind of crooked. I think. It looks better on the screen than it does on my paper. I'm going to rewrite the last term. And the last term goes here. Now, for these middle terms, I'm replacing them. I'm replacing this with positive 3y and negative 21y. Same thing over here, 3y, negative 21y. And again, it doesn't have to be in that order. It can be the other way around. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so right here you're going to factor by grouping. Group these, group these. We're going to factor out a 3y. We are left with 3y plus 1. I'm going to factor out a negative 7. And I am left with 3y plus 1. So it doesn't matter. I always pull out the 3y plus 1s first. But you could pull out the 3y minus 7 either way. I pull out what they have in common, but it's fine the other way around. And you get 3y minus 7 because that's what's left over. If I use FOIL, I should end up like this. And I'm going to check it. 9y squared. My outsides is negative 21y. My insides is positive 3y. That gives me negative 18y. And then 1 times negative 7 is negative 7. If you're going to do the box method, same thing. You start it the same way, except for you put it in box instead of listing it across. You get 3y here. That's what they both have in common. My first term's negative, so I'm going to pull out a negative 7. Column, first term's positive, so I'm going to pull out a positive y. First term's positive. They don't have anything in common, but everything has a 1. So this is a plus 1 because it's the first term's positive. So I am left with 3y minus 7 and y plus, whoops, 3y. Where did I miss? Oh, I missed my 3 right here. Sorry. I was concentrating on my y's. So I have 3y plus 1. I would have missed it because when I checked, but I would have caught myself because 3y times y does not give me my 9y squared. So I would have said, oh, where did I mess up? And I knew right away. Okay, this is the difference of two squares. They're both perfect squares. It's hard to do AC or box because it has no middle term. You can rather use square root property, but to me, it's 8 plus u. Oh, no, we can't use an a minus u. You can't use square root property because we're not solving. We're just factoring. Difference of two squares, they look the same. One's plus, one's minus. Square root of 64 is 8 and 8. Square root of u squared is u. So it's u and u. And that's it. Okay. Now we move on to solving. I'll do this page and then I'll stop the video. Okay, when you solve, let's get all the variables on one side, constants on the other. To do this, you're gonna, for this one, it's just a single variable, not a v squared, it's just v. We are going to say 3 times v is 3v. 3 times 8 is 24. Plus 2v equals negative 26. I'm not going to change my color pens all the time because you have that already written up in my, like all the answers. So I'm going to combine these two to get 5v plus 24 equals negative 26. Now I've got to take my 24 to the other side. I'm going to do that by subtracting. That gives me 5v equals negative 50. Divide by 5. And I get v equals negative 10. You can check this by plugging it back in. Negative 10 plus 8 gives me negative 2. Times 3 gives me negative 6. plus 2 times negative 10 gives me negative 20. And negative 6 plus negative 20 gives us a negative 26. So it checked. Or you can check it using your store button on your calculator. Okay, right here, I'm going to distribute. So, let me kind of separate these. I'm going to have V minus 6. I'm going to have plus 12V, because 2 times 6 is 6V is 12V, and 2 times 5 is 10, equals, I'm going to distribute this negative 2. I get negative 2V minus 2. Now I'm going to combine my like terms before I start moving anything. V and 12V gives me 13V. Negative 6 and positive 10 gives me a positive 4. Equals 2V minus 2. Now I don't care how you do it, I just always take my variables to well, most of the time, I take my variables to the left-hand side. So I'm going to add 2V to both sides. I'm going to get 15V plus 4 equals negative 2. I'm going to take my 4 to the other side by subtracting it. And I get 15V equals negative 6. Divide by 15. And V equals, if I leave my answer like this, the fraction form is fine, but it needs to be reduced. It needs to be, 3 goes into both of them, so you get negative 2/5. Okay, and the other thing is you can, because negative 2/5 is a terminating decimal, you are allowed to put negative 0.4. That is fine. I don't care about that. It's just that if it's a repeating decimal, if this had been 1/3 or if it had been like 5/9, then you couldn't have, because it's a rounding decimal. Okay, so just checking something really quick. All right, here we've got 2 of these. For it to be no solution or all real number solutions, your variable has to disappear. Okay, if your variable disappears and it's a true statement, it's going to be all reals. If your variables disappear and it's not a true statement, then it's no solution. If your variables don't disappear, then you're going to have an answer like we have in the first 2 problems. So I'm going to do this part. Let's call this A. I'm going to do A over here. And I'm going to go ahead and distribute. This gives me negative 4U minus 16 right here. 3 times U equals 3 times U is 3U. 3 times 4 is 12 plus 7. I'm going to combine my like terms. I'm going to do that and get 19. So I get 3U plus 19. I'm going to take my 3U over here. When I do that, that means I'm going to subtract it. My U's do not disappear, so I know it's not going to be a no solution or all real. Okay, so this gives me negative 7U minus 16 equals 19. I'm going to take my constants to the right because I have my variables on the left. I'm going to add 16. Negative 7U equals 35. Divide by negative 7. And I get U is equal to negative 5. Again, you can check this by plugging it in into there. Okay? Let's try the other one. This will be B. Okay, I'm going to distribute this, and I'm going to distribute this. So negative 2 times y is negative 2y. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. I'm going to add 5y. 3 times y is 3y. And 3 times 1 is 3. I'm going to bring over your negative 2. Before I start moving, I'm going to combine my like terms. That gives me 3y minus 2 equals 3y plus 1. All right, I'm going to take this 3y over to the other side by subtracting it. That gives me 0. 3y over here minus 3y gives me 0. Because if one side gives me 0, the other side's got to give that to you if it's the exact same thing. This gives me 2y equals 1. Because my variables disappeared, I'm rather going to have no solution, or I'm going to have all real solutions. But because this is false, those two are not equal, this becomes a no solution. If I had had negative 2 equals negative 2, or I'd have 1 equals 1, then it would be all reals. Okay, when I have fractions and I have a variable in the denominator, I have to worry about my restrictions. Okay, y can be any number except 0. It cannot be 0. I mean, we can have that answer, but in this particular problem, it can't. We're going to have to kick it out if it does. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is multiply everything by our least common denominator, our least common multiple. The two denominators are y and 2, so our LCM, our least common multiple, is 2 times y. I am going to multiply this times 2y. I'm going to multiply this times 2y and this. Now you can do your work all over here if you want. Okay? I'm not going to. 3 times 2y gives me 6y. Right here, you can multiply that and get 20y over y, but that's just going to give you a plus 20. The way I do it, I cancel that and say 10 times 2 is 20. Then I'm going to bring down my equal sign. You can multiply 1 times 2y and get 2y divided by 2, and the 2's will reduce to give you y. But the way I do it is I say 2 goes into 2, and 1 times y is y. Now I don't care how you do this. This is a little bit different because I have my constants over here. I can go ahead and bring my y over here, or my 20 over here, but on this particular case, because my constants are on my left, I am going to take my letters, my variables to the right by subtracting 6y. And I get 20 equals negative 5y. Divide by negative 5. And y equals negative 4. And that is an okay answer because it's not 0, so we don't have to kick it out. It's not an extraneous solution, as they call it. You can check this answer. You can plug that into negative 4 wherever you see y. Which is only that one place, okay? And it should give us this right here. Now for me, I don't know how you guys learned how to do this, but it's easy for me to work with mixed numerals, so I change this into a negative 2 1/2 and positive 3 and negative 2 1/2 gives me a half. Now you might want to change it to decimals, whatever. I don't really care. You can check it on your calculator. The other way you could have checked it is you could have made this 12/4 so that we have a common denominator. 12 plus a negative 10, because this is negative, that's going to give me 2/4. 2/4 reduces to 1/2, so I know it checked out. Okay, I will make another video for the next problem.